I'm going to start by talking at the beginning of this training just a little bit about how to start organizing, just kind of some basic 101, because if you have to fight book bans in your school, and to be honest, a lot of the things we're going to talk tonight will also apply to, if you have some horrible policy that's going to impact the curriculum in your school, because there's some really, really bad curriculums being pushed out there now, or maybe it's attack on sex education or social emotional learning, or maybe they're trying to remove race from the education. A lot of these things will be applicable. So you learn tools of the trade, but we will also talk specifically about book bans. So we're going to start off by talking a little bit about some basic organizing. And then we're going to talk to Mary, who's our guest tonight, about what she's doing so you can get that firsthand experience. And then we'll come back and we'll dig into more about like how to talk in front of your school board, how to be effective, how to talk about book banning. And then at the end, like I said, we'll take some questions. So just wanted to start and say we love to call our trainings Troublemaker trainings. That came out of the fact that we started organizing in my local community after the 2016 election. And the powers that be had never really been challenged before, and they really didn't like it. And they started to call us troublemakers on the record just for showing up and talking. So we love that. So we own it as a badge of honor, and we want to train all of you to make some trouble in a good way in your communities. Now we know, with school boards, you hear a lot about book bans, but this is the point now of contention. There's not really an issue that any of these like very coordinated extremist groups care about. They're just trying to cause chaos at school board. So they'll jump from issue to issue. So it was anti-masking, and then it was CRT, and then it was book banning, and now it's attacks on sex ed and social emotional learning, and some really horrendous anti-LGBTQ policies. Oh my goodness, my dog wants to go out. Okay, my husband's got it. So anyways, what I'm trying to say is that it's really important like to focus on all of those issues, because we know this is going to be a never-ending parade of issues in front of school boards. But we want to talk tonight is how do you effectively organize in your community and then fight back on all of these efforts. What I always like to say is just number one, just do it. I know many of you are here tonight, you're going to walk away and you're going to be like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. Number one, women tend to question their abilities. Usually we have to be told like 7 or 8 times that we can do something. You are more than qualified. If you care about this issue, if you want to make a difference, that is all you need. You don't have to understand all of the laws or the policies. You just have to take action. And the other thing too is I like to tell people, if you start it, other people will join in. So my local group, we started with 12 people in a Facebook group. Now we have almost 800 people in a pretty conservative area of Cincinnati. Our national Facebook group for Red, Wine, and Blue Sweep started with 25 women in Kentucky. It's now 220,000 women across the country. I have done this training so many times, and I have talked to so many women who have started groups, and nobody has ever told me that they started something and that nobody joined. That's just not the way it goes. You will get probably more people joining than you anticipated. So just get going, just start it, and just do it. So what are the things you need to think about if you want to start organizing in your community? Maybe you're anticipating some problems at your school board. Maybe you already have problems there. Maybe you've got extremists elected, and you really need to organize so that you can plan. So you're going to get started with a group. One of the things you just need to think about is, how are you going to communicate? You obviously, if you're going to bring people in, you need to find a way to build community around them. You need to have a way for people to interact and chat and for you to share information. So there's a multiple ways you can do this. I know that sometimes we all love to hate on Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook, but I have to admit that it is a pretty good place to organize because you can form groups. It's a low barrier to entry. People don't have to do anything. They don't have to come to an event. They don't have to sign up for anything you're offering. They can just join and kind of get a feel for what's going on. It's also easy to control, right? You control who comes in. You can make it private. So, if you are on Facebook and that's your thing, then that's actually a really good place to organize. But it is not the only place. I met a group in Nevada who were in a retirement home, and none of them like social media. So they just used an email list. That being said, if you are a group maybe of younger people and you're not big on Facebook, you can use things like Slack or WhatsApp or Signal. But whatever you think is going to work for you, just kind of think through, or maybe you're going to do multiple. Maybe you'll have your group leaders on a WhatsApp channel and you'll use a Facebook group. But just think through what is best for you? Where are you most comfortable, and how are you going to communicate with your people you're bringing in? And then think about what your focus is. It's really easy to start getting people together and then everybody's talking about what they want to do. Be really clear. Are you there just to talk about what's going on at your school board? Or maybe you want to tackle all of the politics in your city. Maybe you want to be issue focused. You're just going to, deal with book bans. You're just going to deal with sex education in your school. Just decide what it is you're going to focus on. It is much easier to start with that focus so that when people come in, they're clear on what you're doing. It's fine to start on one thing, and maybe as you get bigger and grow, you kind of expand. And I think Mary tonight is an example of that, who's going to speak. But just start with a focus so you can tell people what it is that you are doing. And then think through who's going to be invited to join this group, because is it open to anybody in your community? Is it open to just people who live in your school district? Is it open to anybody of any political party, or do you want to limit that? Thinking through, who is welcome, who do you want in that group? My example is that in my local group that we focus on our local community and any type of elections or politics that affect our community. And we do not let anybody join who does not live in our community. And that is simply because if we let people in from the next city over or the next county over, we're going to get too far afield. We're going to have too many competing interests for what we want to focus on, and that's just going to not be great. So just think that through, because once people start joining, you're going to have to enforce it, because people will push back on you. They will say, my sister lives like 3 cities over and she really needs a group like this. You just have to say no. And it'll make a difference if you keep your group very focused on that. And then the last thing, of course, is what are you gonna name it? And it may sound like a dumb thing to talk about, but it's actually kind of important, and it's based on what your vibe is and what you want to communicate. So you can do everything. Like Mary, who's speaking tonight, her group is called FAB, which is awesome, but it stands for Families Against Book Bans. And, that's great, because it's very clear to everybody what you're focusing on, what you're there for. If you're on Facebook, this is a group I want to join. It's against book bans. But maybe you want to go, FAB is actually great for an abbreviation. Maybe you want to, go that fun route. Maybe you want to give it a fun sense where people are going to be like, oh, this sounds kind of cool. I've seen fun names. There's a group in Cleveland called GRR, Grassroots Resistance. And they say GRR because they like to say, tell people I'm in GRR. I've seen everything from, let's see. I'm on the wrong page here. I've seen everything from like Bay Village Nasty Women to Berkeley Badasses, so there's all kinds of fun things, but what your group is named actually kind of sets the vibe and tone and lets people know a lot about you. So just think that through as to what you would like that to be. And then more things to consider is very, very important that when you do get started, that you have a social component to your organization. All work and no play will not be fun. People are joining this. It is serious work. It is hard work, but you also make a lot of friendships. I have friends now that I would never have met if I had not started to get involved locally in politics. And these people are now some of my very best friends. So you build those relationships, and that's what brings people back. So you go to the school board meeting, but then you go out and have a happy hour. You have meetings together over cocktails or over an appetizer, or you meet up in a restaurant, because that is the way that you build those relationships and keep people invested. And then the last thing I like to talk about is just delegate. Some of us are type A personalities, and we very much want to control everything that happens in our group, but that is not going to help you expand the leadership. That is not going to get more people involved. I have found, and everyone I've talked to has said this, is that you'll be amazed at the breadth of skills you will bring in. Somebody will be really great at writing. Someone will have mad social media skills. Somebody is a graphic designer. Maybe somebody has done PR or media. Tap into people's skills and delegate things out to them, because if you have a role, you are more invested and you are more likely to stay involved. And don't be afraid to ask people directly to take on a role. A lot of people kind of hesitate, and even I did when I first started working for Red, Wine, and Blue. I felt like I was imposing on people when I asked them to come do things. But what I found is people are flattered when you ask them. Why would somebody be upset when you say, I think you'd be really great at this. Would you mind doing it? The worst that happens is they say no, but they're not going to be offended that you think they'd be really good at doing some type of a role. So don't be afraid to reach out. Please delegate. Like I said, that will help strengthen your group and get more and more people involved. So I'm going to stop screen sharing and I am going to kick it over to Julie and to our guest, Mary, kind of give you some on the ground firsthand experience in doing this.
Okay, welcome, Mary. Fab is actually a really great name. That is a great name for your group. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So, my professional background is in education. I have a degree in elementary education. I'm currently a preschool teacher. You might be able to see I actually have a licensed preschool in my home. Personally, I'm a wife and a mom to two kids. My son is transgender, and so I'm intimately aware of the marginalization happening to a lot of communities. So when we got involved in the book banning thing, this was sort of secondary to already being involved advocating for our son. I'm also an avid reader, and I have two children who love to read. So the idea of restricting access to books kind of blew my mind. As an organization, FAB has our board is made of four women. We are all mothers. None of us are professional organizers. We have a lawyer, a teacher, a small business owner, and someone who does marketing and advertising. So that's who we are.
And none of you had ever done this kind of thing before, right?
Not really. I helped start a charter school, the first charter school in our county. And so that was organizing, but not in the way, not in
Not
the
like
way that this
this.
is organized. Not like where I drive to the state house every couple of weeks at this point. So
Right.
no, not like this.
So tell us, how did Fab get started?
Sure. So in the fall of 2022, we had two individuals in our community challenge 97 books in our public school system. And the superintendent made the decision to go ahead and pull all 97 books from the shelves. So effectively, they were banned at that point. And so I think most of us in the community were like shocked. I had heard a little bit about Moms for Liberty and the movement of challenging books, but it hit here pretty unexpectedly and very quickly. We're in a small town on the coast of South Carolina, and most people know each other. The person who challenged 96 of the 97 is someone I've known for 18 years. She has
Wow.
children my children's age. So when that happened, I think a lot of us individually were appalled and shocked and not really sure what to do. And that percolated for a couple of months. And then there was a community event. There was a panel of some statewide experts who were brought in to talk to us about what was happening and what we could do. At the same time, my daughter, who is a senior in high school, was involved with the League of Women Voters, and they challenged her to get youth involved in something, and she picked this topic. So sort of all these pieces were happening, and then our founder, Melinda, says she was sitting on her couch one night saying, somebody should organize all these people. We're all outraged. Someone should organize us. And her husband said, well, why don't you? And so she did. She created a private Facebook group in January of 23. There were 12 people in it when I joined the next day. We have over 500 now. But I will tell you that I think ultimately what propelled us to take action is my daughter's involvement, again, with the League of Women Voters. She was also part of a student-led book group called Diversity Awareness Youth Literacy Organization. She was the president and co-founder at her school. And then Melinda's son was reading The Handmaid's Tale for an AP English class that fall, and they came into his classroom and took all the books away. And when he came home and told his mom, she was like, this cannot be happening. Her husband is a veteran. He's retired from the U.S. Marine Corps. And so I think our children is what really motivated us to get involved.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I really, truly can. So, what are some of the tactics or actions that you guys use that were like super effective?
So I think, honestly, one thing that has been helpful here is we're in a small town. People are very connected. We worked very hard to be respectful when we engaged with people and to reach out to all different kinds of people. We had retirees, we had current teachers, we had religious leaders, we even had authors who were willing to come and speak. The most prominent thing we did the first few months was we were at every single school board meeting, in person, or people were watching online. We made public comments. Again, we were always respectful, but just brought up over and over again all the things that are wrong with censorship. We were very lucky. We also had some youth, including my daughter, who came to every meeting and spoke. That got a lot of attention from our school board members. It also got a lot of media attention. And that sort of concerted effort helped us to be successful. We also partnered with a lot of state organizations, and I can't emphasize enough that you don't have to do this by yourself. We have a phenomenal ACLU in South Carolina. We have a Freedom to Read of South Carolina that connects coalitions around the state. We reached out to teachers and librarians. We tried to make a lot of connections and ask other people to help. And I think that was probably the biggest reason we were successful. We just tried to unify people and not be divisive and not call names. And we tried very hard to remain nonpartisan. This really is actually a nonpartisan issue. So.
Right. Well, we've had several, different guests throughout, the last year, 2 years or so, to talk about this topic because it is, really nationwide. One of the things they always say is to really know what your policy for your school board or your school district is for actually, I guess investigating the book is really what they do initially before it's supposed to be yanked, I thought. But was yanking those 97 books, was that okay? Was that what was allowed in your rules?
No, and that is, I'm glad that you mentioned that. One of the things that I always tell people that is important if you're going to take this on is you need to know the policies and you need to do everything you can to be vocal about the fact that they should be following the policies. So the books were pulled sort of before it was super public, and unfortunately, it appears that that was a violation of the policy at the time. The board then changed the policy so that it was no longer a violation of the policy. But we were always very vocal about the importance of following that policy. And I don't think I gave you the happy ending, which is that 92 of the books were returned to the shelves. 5 were what we call permanently banned, which means they will not be available for 5 years. But 91 were returned. One of the books they challenged was not on any of our bookshelves. So that one was sort of a moot point. But yes, knowing the policy and then being very public and open about asking that the policy be followed is hugely important.
Well, and that having that one book in that list that wasn't even on the bookshelf, that's very indicative of what's happening in other places. A lot of this is cut and paste. So they're just, oh, this is the list that somebody passed down, from God knows what state or where it is. And you didn't even have that on the shelf. So, it just boggles the mind.
It does.
So how did you grow your group? How did your group, expand? How did you get folks to join with you to do actions and things?
So we started with that private Facebook group, but we pretty quickly got a public Facebook page and a public Instagram page, and we have worked very hard, some weeks better than others, to remain active on those channels. So that certainly reached a lot of people. We also pretty quickly realized we needed a roadshow to go to local organizations and tell them what we were doing and why this issue mattered, how they could be involved. I mean, that's something we continue to do now, though our books were mostly returned at this point. For probably like most people on the call, this has become a state issue. So now our state has taken up some regulations that would impact book banning. So we continue to go around making sure people are aware of what's happening and how they can push back. I mentioned partnerships with some state organizations, but also locally we partnered with our Low Country Pride, which is our LGBTQ+ advocacy group. We were partnered with the student book club I mentioned that my daughter was in, and working with them and mostly supporting their work. We, at every school board meeting, we had little bookmarks made that had our logo and had a QR code people could scan to get more information, and had some suggestions for how to be respectful during board meetings. Sometimes that can be really hard. We have a very recognizable and simple logo, and we used it consistently in marketing. We had buttons made that had that on there, and so people started to see it and know it and ask questions. We also did social events, very important. We are a small town, so there's one place to go to have beer in an outdoor venue, and we had a lot of events there, and that helped. And then we've also done a lot of outreach. So we have a couple of big festivals downtown. We have one coming up in May that celebrates the Gullah Geechee people of our area, and we go to those. We have a table and we just give away books, and we give away books that represent diversity and all types of people and stories. And we have a little sticker in those books that says who we are and what we're doing, again with our QR code. And we just try to keep making people aware of what has happened, what continues to happen, and invite them to be a part of the solution with us.
That's wonderful. So what advice do you have for people here tonight who might be interested in starting a group?
Well, the other Julie had so many great points in that presentation. And I don't know if you could see, I was just nodding along. Yes, all of those things. I made a quick list, and so some of these may be redundant. First of all, partnering and following on social media the national organizations who are doing this work, particularly the ACLU and PEN America. They are really experts in what's happening, and in creative ways to push back. We also partnered with also the ALA, the American Library Association. We also partnered with our state association of school librarians, again, our Freedom to Read group. So we just had experts telling us what was happening and how we could be helpful. I think it's crucial that people get acquainted with book bans. Our book bans are not unique. Everybody's book bans are really kind of the same. If you don't know what Book Looks is yet, you need to learn about Book Looks. That's where they're getting their biased reviews of books. You also need to learn about your policies, and all of those school board policies are public information. So if it's not on your district website, you need to ask for it, and they are required to give it to you. Attending school board meetings, just educating yourself. You know, the good and bad part of the internet is we have access to all information, right? All the time. And there's a lot out there that you can find that's helpful. I also think I personally am very convicted that respectful engagement is critical. That name calling and mocking people and, well, if you're going to ban this, then I'm going to ban that, it does not actually really move the ball. That's my own personal conviction, but I just think it really matters how we go about this. Particularly in our case, we had a lot of youth watching and participating, and we wanted to model for them, you know, what we think is good citizenship. I also think it's important to remember there's multiple ways to attack censorship. You can talk about the statistics of it in marginalized communities. You can talk about personal stories and how it's impacting you or someone you know. You can address specific works of literature. We did all of that with all different speakers. And I think different things resonate for different people. So that's helpful. I cannot say enough asking teachers and librarians what they need, how we could be helpful. They're really the experts. The last thing I would tell you is it takes a lot of time, and to be frank, it can cost a lot of money. It's, you know, you're going to meetings and people need to hire babysitters, and you have to ask for help. That slide that said delegate, yes, and that was a struggle for us in the beginning. It takes a lot of people to do this, but the vast majority of the population is opposed to censorship. So there are a lot of people who care about this and want to be involved if you give them an opportunity to do that.
Okay. Well, thank you so very much for sharing with us today. You know, the things that I always like to highlight are you don't have to have some, you know, expertise in organizing, that, you know, it's easy to get a group started, just like Julie said in the slides, and you've reiterated that. But it's important to know what the rules are. Definitely respectful engagement. That's what I'm sure that comes up later in the presentation as well. So, you know, you really talked about all the things that we talk about during Troublemaker training. So I really do appreciate you coming and sharing.
Thank you so much for letting us share our story. We're very passionate about it, and would love to help and support other people any way we can. This is a battle that's going to take all of us. So.
All right. Well, thank you, Julie. I'm going to kick it back over to you.
So let's talk a little bit now. Let's move into showing up at the school board and why this is so important. So you need to show up to take action. If you don't show up, then there is one voice in the room, and it sounds like they represent the community, which is not true. They're just the loudest voices in the room. It's very important that your community stands up for common sense and opposes extremism, and make it clear that you are the majority. Your goal is to influence not only the school board members, but it is also to influence your community, because as Mary said, she went around on these like tours to meet other groups because it's so important to spread the word. A lot of people just will have no awareness. They're busy. We're all busy, but you're running around between jobs and house and kids and everything else. So people just aren't always paying attention. But when they find out, they're usually pretty appalled. So it's really important to be there, to make those speeches, then to share that information out on social media so that people can hear what's going on. And again, sometimes it seems a little scary to get up and talk about some of this stuff, but Mary said this and I agree. We are the majority. So these are just some of the statistics that we have. We have another training where we talk about some of these, and I pulled these statistics, but 87% of people do not support banning books that discuss race. 83 don't support banning books critical of US history. 98% of voters support sex ed in high school and 89 in middle school. I mean, these numbers are not normal in politics. You don't get 80 and 90% numbers. So we are the majority. And these really hold true for so many other things like social emotional learning, and even like anti-LGBTQ plus policies. You are in the majority. So don't be intimidated by getting up there to speak, because most people in that room are going to agree with you, and most people in the community are going to agree to you. You are speaking for the majority. So let's talk about, you got this group, you're forming, you've got your Facebook group or your Signal group or whatever you're doing, and you need to start taking action. Obviously, we're going to talk about showing up at school board, but what are some other things you can do? Number one, we just got to talk to our school board. So find ways, to contact them. So this could be as easy as you, send an email. I don't know if they have phone, accessibility, but leaving voicemails or making phone calls, sending those emails, sending written letters. The trick to do though, is to really make sure that it's easy. Because you can go in your Facebook group and say, hey, let's all send an email to our school board. People don't necessarily just do that because you post it. You kind of need a handhold. So make sure like you give them maybe an outline of like some talking points and things they can put in that email, or share a sample. You don't want them to all send the same email, but giving an example of what you sent, asking people to comment when they did it, a little bit of like a group push, a little FOMO. Make sure you give them the email address and the names. Make it as easy as possible, because if people have to go search for that stuff, every step in the process they have to do, the less and less people will do it. So no matter what you want people to do, just make it super easy for them and give them examples and celebrate people for doing it, because it's intimidating to reach out to elected officials, even at the local level, if you've never done it before. Social media campaign. We just discussed how important it is that you share this information with your community. Social media campaigns also put pressure on elected officials. So we have a local school board here who had some extremist candidates elected, and one of the members of the local group down there started a TikTok, and they basically just made TikToks of some of the like outrageous things that school board members were saying, and they posted them, and it got a really huge following in the township where they live. So coordinating a social media campaign, the goal is to inform the community and to put pressure on the school board. So you can write personal posts about like what you observed at the school board meeting, videos and speeches of like either amazing speeches that are being given, or some of the kind of like extremist things being said, or some of the things school members are putting out there. If there's newspaper articles highlighting what's going on, getting that type of stuff covered, sharing that out on social media is really important. This is a good thing to like delegate. Maybe somebody's really good at social media. It's a good delegation thing. Attending meetings obviously is incredibly important. But you don't just want to, again, drop in like the Facebook group, hey, we're going to all show up at this date and time, because that doesn't mean people will. It's important to kind of get a feeling for, who's going, how many people are going. So you can create a Facebook event, and see who responds to it. When I was organizing here locally for something we had going on at our city council, we actually posted a sign up genius, because that was great, because we actually captured people's emails then. And we just kept building our email list. And then the next time we were able to email that same list, and we kept adding to it and adding to it and adding to it. And so we had a multitude of ways to reach people, and we were able to communicate and get commitments like, okay, we're going to come. So we knew we had 10 or 15 people at least who were going to show up at that school board meeting. And when you get there, it's also it's important to let the school board members know that you guys are all together. You're all on the same side. Now, whether that is you get there early enough that you can sit together. Some people wear like they make up shirts and they wear the same shirt. I've also, my favorite was somebody just printed up stickers. And then that way, when someone walked in from work and they were rushing in, they didn't have to go home and change. They just slapped on a sticker and it just showed that you were there with the people who were opposing the book ban. But you just want to show the strength in numbers. That even if not everybody's going to speak, you got some people there to listen. And this is to show that you are which side you're on. And then the last piece is talking about speakers. Again, we don't just want to drop in the Facebook group that we need speakers and hope people show up to do it. It's really important, if you can, to kind of line up who's going to speak and have an idea of how many people you can get up there. Thinking about too, what are all of the points that you want to hit? So making sure your speakers, everybody's kind of like hitting on all the major points that you want to get out there. And I know, Marion, already talked about this, but definitely familiarize yourself with the rules for speaking at your school board. It's super important because you don't want to get there and find out that you had to sign up online the night before, or find out that it's a 3-minute limit and you wrote this amazing speech that, goes 5 minutes. Also to know, like, is public comment at the beginning, in the middle, at the end? Because if you've got parents with babysitters, I mean, if it's a 2-hour meeting, it's really good to kind of know that information ahead of time. So definitely familiarize yourself with the rules before you show up for the school board meeting. All right, so now you're there, you got your group there, you're speaking, you're ready to go. How can we be effective? Well, number one, it's really clear, and you will probably see that the opposition tends to bring in people who don't even live in the community. They may find some people that live in the community, but a lot of times they're coming from outside neighboring cities or even like from further away. We had an issue at my city council and literally people were standing up and one guy said, I'm from Wisconsin. You guys, I'm in Ohio. I'm in Cincinnati, Ohio. He came from Wisconsin. But the thing is that a lot of times at these kind of meetings, you have to give an address or say where you live. So it became really obvious that most of the people were not from our community. So when you get up there, introduce yourself and show your connection to the community. I have 2 kids in the school. I have grandkids that go here. I've owned a business here for this long. Just showing that you're connected and you're part of the community makes an impact. And then just be really clear. Why are you speaking today? Why do you care about this issue? I'm speaking. I read about this in the newspaper. I saw this on social media, and I couldn't believe that my school district was actually talking about taking, 97 books off the shelves. I care about this because my kids go to this school, and I want to make sure that they have access to like the books that are important to them. Personal stories, can't emphasize this enough. Personal stories are what make the greatest impact. I know that a lot of people love to get up and share data, and I'm not saying you should never share data, but just throwing statistics and facts after facts don't really touch people's hearts. Most people tune it out and they also forget it. A personal story is what moves people. So how does this potential ban impact you, your kids, somebody you know? Maybe, if you don't have a story in that vein, maybe you can talk about a book that you read as a child that completely impacted you. There are, a multitude of books that are being banned that I'm sure most of us maybe read in our own school days. So, anything you can do to personalize your story, that is what really touches people and actually will make people remember and have the biggest impact when you leave. Also better for social media sharing afterwards. Stay focused. A lot of times the opposition on these loves to just kind of bring in politicians and talk about, what the federal government is doing, your congressperson, but don't do that. We don't want them to get into conversations about like general, like what the librarian associations are doing or what, teachers unions are doing. We want to focus on your town. So if you talk about what's going on at your city, your teachers, your school librarians, because a lot of people listen to the news and they hear these like, federal things that are happening and they get really upset. But then you say, oh, is your child teacher, reading these like inappropriate books? And oh, not my child's teacher, because locally people don't feel that way about their own school district. So keep it focused on what's going on in your town. Don't get sucked into conversations about like larger politics. And remember this, Did I spell partisan? No, I guess I did. A second, I thought it was spelled wrong. Make sure the focus is on your kids and not on any kind of partisanship. So we'll talk about more about that in just a little bit. The other thing we love to bring up, because it's so hard not to do this, is do not repeat disinformation. The other side is going to get up and say some probably really far out things, talking about pornography in school libraries and teachers being groomers. And it is so, the impulse is to get up and just yell, teachers are not groomers. We don't have pornography in our school library. But what you're actually doing is you're reinforcing the disinformation. And I know that sounds a little bit off the wall, but it's true. It's just neuroscience. It's just how our brain works. And when you tell someone and repeat disinformation, the example here is about like guns. I know you're trying to tell them that this is what we want is just background checks, that no one's taking your gun. But what you're actually reinforcing is the notion of taking guns. And so people a couple of weeks later will only remember, wait, I heard something about pornography in my school library, and they kind of lose the rest of the argument. So it is imperative that you do not repeat disinformation. Also, please don't share disinformation online. Don't do it. Even screenshotting disinformation just repeats it. So how you fight it instead is you want to just use a useful line that shares truthful information. It is okay if somebody is saying something at the podium and you go up after them. Don't repeat what they're saying as disinformation, but it's okay to acknowledge it. The previous speaker said some stuff that is just not accurate. And it's fair to also say, like, there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation online, but I believe that all students should learn accurate history. Teaching fairy tales doesn't prepare them. Students should all feel welcome, accepted at school, and see themselves in their stories. You wanted to share the truthful information and not repeat what the other side is saying. We talked a little bit about this, and Mary kind of touched on this, and I 100% agree with this, is we want to, it's okay to define who the opposition is in this, but we don't want to turn other parents into villains. Pitting parents versus parents is never a good look. And the other thing too is that there are a lot of parents who may not really know what's going on. They've just heard these crazy rumors in the community. They're coming to meetings or they're watching them online, just try to figure out what the heck's going on. So you don't want to start saying to any parents who are on the opposite side that like they're like the villain or they're the horrible people, because if there's somebody there who's kind of persuadable and they're not so sure, that might completely turn them off. It is okay to say there are a few extremists, or maybe if there's a really, really extremist school board member, it's okay to turn the politicians into the villain, but you don't want to say everybody who opposes this is like an awful person. Also, I wouldn't bring political groups into it because honestly, like I said, there's people, this is not a partisan issue across the board. Most people oppose book bans. So you don't want to alienate anybody who may not share the same political party as you. But let's see, one other thing that, and I'm going to share this information, we just did a study with another group, and one of the things we learned is that people really, really don't like the idea that this is a political agenda. And one of the things is if you name all of the kinds of bans that are actually being pushed in this country, it makes it really clear to people that this is a political agenda that's being pushed by extremist groups. So you can tell them, for example, that there's been over 1,700 book bans in the country, that they're banning books about sex and race and LGBTQ plus issues, including things like Anne Frank, books about, Martin Luther King Jr., LGBTQ youth struggling. Those are the kind of books that are being banned. They're trying to ban LGBTQ students from being bullied. From schools supporting those kids who are being bullied. They're trying to ban sex ed. They're trying to ban social emotional learning and teaching empathy. There's even places that are trying to require bodily inspections and period tracking of girls. And when you start naming off all those bans, people kind of go, what? That impact of hearing all those bans begins to make them realize that the sheer number is just political, it's disingenuous, and it really makes them question the motive of the people behind them. So that is one approach to kind of helping to define the opposition. Next thing I'm going to show, and you do not have to write these down because I'm just going to mail them to you. We have given you a lot of different talking points here that you can use, to call out the book bans. One of my favorites is just obviously, you can do the other side. You can do what's right for your child. You don't have to let them read those books, but you don't get to dictate what is right for my family. And that's what's going on here, is they're taking the choice away from everybody and dictating how they want other people to live their lives. So I will send all of these book ban talking points out to you. The other thing I want to talk about, though, from the study that we just did and what we found out was one of the most persuasive things is to really focus on the impact on students. That is what really moves a lot of people. So talking about necessarily how, like, what you want to do as parents or how this impacts you as parents, but talking about what kids are losing or being impacted by. So they're losing their basic rights to safety and knowledge. They're not being taught empathy. They can't get the information they need to understand the world. It's okay to be uncomfortable learning about the dark aspects of our history, but the kids need to learn accurate history. And then the other thing, these were some of the most concerning impacts on this study group that we did for parents and people involved, that the kids will lose knowledge of history, access to higher education, sense of safety, access to books, freedom to learn about the world, different perspectives. They'll become narrow-minded. So if you can work these types of things into like your points before your board, that can be super helpful. I'm going to turn it over to Julie now. We're going to talk a little bit about some actions. If you get your group started, some things you can do to also call attention to what's going on at your school board.
Well, we call this the think outside of the box slide. And this is actually one of my favorite things, because you can do all kinds of things that, seemingly, aren't the same, and will draw positive media attention and positive attention to your event. So if you have a positive event like a school supply drive to support the teachers, you can pass out info on book bans during that. You can sign a big thank you card for teachers and librarians, because right now they're getting beat up pretty good from these folks, calling them horrid names. And, it would be nice to show that, there's still a whole big, huge group of us out here who appreciate them. You can pass out banned books at meetings. You can stock little libraries with banned books. You can write on sidewalk with sidewalk chalk. You can highlight books that are being banned on social media and share, the subjects and the stories and awards that they've won. You can have yard signs to support, your side. You can wear T-shirts with banned authors or books or wording about bans. You can hold a banned book club, which is good for parents and students. You can change profile pictures to you holding banned books. And you can also do a read-in for banned books. So we had a read-in for Accurate Education several years ago down at our state school board in Columbus. It was a rainy Tuesday morning and cold a little bit. But we had a very positive event. We were calm, we were quiet, we sat and read books by authors of color. And because at that time, that was the kind of things that were being, really popular, being banned. There was an opposition group that was there on the other side of the building, and they were loud and they shoved people and they were obnoxious. But we remained calm, and we got a lot of great press, and positive information was really shared that day. So I highly encourage you doing those kinds of things.
Okay, and just some final thoughts here. So I think Mary said this perfectly. Just, you want to be the calm people in the room. Sometimes the other side can get a little out of control, and if people are watching, you want to be the calm, respectful ones, because people are going to be like, that's the side I want to be on. Plus, it does no good really to yell and scream and to get into a shouting match. It doesn't make a difference. It doesn't change or move the needle. Definitely reach out and support teachers and librarians, anything you can do to let them know, because they are under attack right now. So just to know that there are parents in the district on their side. There are teachers who don't want to go speak at a school board meeting, but they might write a letter that a parent can read. There's things they can, you can do to support them. We already talked about learn the book review process at your school. I'm sorry, this is actually different than the school board procedure. Most schools, or all schools, should have a book review process. So if someone does challenge a book, there should be a step-by-step procedure. It's usually they have to file something. Usually has to say that they've read the book and specifically say what they object to. And Mary can talk, this happened in their district, and they have a committee of parents who come and read the book and make recommendations to the school board. What we're finding is a lot of school districts aren't following their policy. Like, they'll get a complaint and they'll just immediately go pull the book off the shelf. So that's a good way to go back and challenge the school board if they're not following their policies. And you can also watch other school districts and prepare, because like Mary said, this is a very coordinated effort. I mean, this is the same books with the same passages and the same things are being challenged around the country. It is a right-wing extremist playbook. And they're following it everywhere. So if something's happening in the district next to you, watch the school board feed, go to the meeting, talk to the parents in that district. You can kind of make a game plan for when and if it does come to your school. And then just so you guys know, I'm going to drop a link to this in a sec. Resources, we have a parent playbook and a troublemaker guide. Troublemaker guide teaches you how to get organizing. Parent playbook's a little more focused on dealing with book bans. You can download those from our website. And then for those of you who are gonna get off here and start a group, or maybe you already have one, Julie talked about Trouble Nation at the beginning, but this is our grassroots organizations that we put on that website, on that map where people can find you, and we will help you through this whole process. When we first started doing these trainings, we did not have Trouble Nation, and now we do. So you will have the support you need if you get started. You will not be alone. Let's see, we'll take some questions. And Julie, I know there were some in the chat, so if you guys have questions now, feel free to drop them in the chat.
Yeah,
Computer.
someone had asked about using the landing page to promote events, because they said they're finding that some prefer Facebook and some email. And we know that, you can post your events, but everybody's not going to see it. So do you want to talk to that?
Do you mean like a Facebook event? Is that, I'm
Yeah.
assuming that's what you're talking about? Yeah. The thing I like about social media, like with Facebook, is that you can build community and you can have those conversations in group chats. The bad thing is that the algorithm controls what people see. So, and social media is actually right now suppressing political posts. So if they consider your post political, you may get suppressed. So it is really a good idea to have multiple platforms. I know Mary said that they're on Instagram and Facebook. Having an email list is super helpful. I don't know if everybody will get on a Slack or a WhatsApp, but the more ways you can have to communicate, just the better off you're going to be.
Sorry if I can jump in. Somebody asked, and I know this was a little confusing, if you saw the 60 Minutes piece that talked about our community, we did not create these book review committees. That was our policy. Our district's policy at the time was to have these review committees. And I think that I know there was a lot of confusion that somehow FAB had created this idea. That was our policy. Unfortunately, the regulations that the state is trying to pass right now through the State Board of Education would eliminate those review committees. But just to clarify that. And I also just want to give a quick shout out that it is actually National School Library Month, the whole month of April, and today is School Librarian Day. So maybe like your first troublemaking thing you could do is just write a thank you note to your school librarian.
That's fabulous. Another question just popped in the chat. Do you recommend members running for school board? Yes. And we've been told that you have to be asked 7 times. So please run for school board. Please, please, please run for school board. 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 We need great people who care about kids and care about them getting accurate education and having access to the literature that we had access to as children. So yes, please run for school board.
And the good thing is if you form these groups, then you have built-in, support for your campaigns. And honestly, I will tell you, I've had 2 people in my district run for school board. They both lost the first time. And the second time, the one gentleman came in first place, and he was the first non-white school board member that we had, but he got the name recognition. He had our support. He only lost by like 100 votes the first time. So then like I said, he beat everybody the second time. We had another woman just run and she lost too by like 100 votes. I'm pretty sure she's going to win next time that she runs. So, definitely run and have your members support you. The only thing I'll say with these groups is just be careful. We do kind of put out a list of people we're supporting, but just be really careful because if you're raising money and doing stuff like that for candidates, there's like PAC laws and you have to just make sure you're not getting yourself in legal trouble, but you might have a lawyer in your group who will help you.
Someone just asked, how do you suggest responding to people who say that book bans aren't really bans because you can get the books at other libraries or online?
Okay, well,
if I can jump in on this one, because this was a common refrain in ours. First of all, I think we have to unpack that is someone is coming from a position of privilege to say that. Everyone does not have access to public libraries, whether that's a transportation limitation or rural districts or whatever. And people who are trying to have enough food to eat are not ordering books on Amazon. In our district, more than 60% of the students are on free and reduced lunch. And so we use that statistic to say, for many of those children, the only place they have access to books is in their school library. So also that at some point though, for me, the like back and forth is a waste of time and energy. But we did try to make the point about poverty and the geographical layout of our community is that we're not in an urban area where people have public transportation or can just walk to the library. That doesn't exist where we are. So, but I do think it's important to recognize that that comes from a position of privilege when they say that they're not really banned if you can order on Amazon.
And I
Oh,
think
and also publishers
Go
are
ahead.
not publishing books much longer that are getting banned. So
And I think you can also make out the point that now they've moved from schools to public libraries. So they're attacking public libraries as well. And I guess the other point I would make is I was going to say, just like, I don't care where else they can get it. The fact that they're removing it from the school is sending a message that this is an inappropriate book, and hence the stories in the book are inappropriate, which often is the children in the school who see themselves in those books. So, you know, there's more to it than just whether it's truly banned. I think I'd also push back and go, all banning is bad. Don't you agree with that? I don't know what they're going to say to that, but that's what I would say.
Then someone just asked about funding. What about funding for this effort?
I don't have any, we don't raise money for my group. I don't know about you, Mary.
you know, that's something we have not done well. We need to get more comfortable asking people for money. We have had some success, like when we're going to give away books, I will publish a wish list. And like Target was doing a buy one book, get one half price sale or something. And so a bunch of people ordered books. But mostly it's us, and eventually we're trying to get our 501c3 status so we can write some grants, because the things we want to do can be very costly.
Yeah, my grassroots groups, like you know, it's very informal. We might sell some stuff or raise some money and somebody just holds it in a bank account. Like, you know, you can set up a PAC, you can get a BSC3, like you can do it a multitude of ways, but you don't, I mean, if you want to buy books or have that kind of stuff, yes, you need to have someone helping to fund that. But showing up to school board and getting on social media doesn't cost anything. So you can do that without raising funds.
Then last question here, because I know we're running out of time, is how do you remain nonpartisan?
I think you organize around values, and that's what Red, Wine, and Blue does. So we organize around shared values that all kids should feel welcome and supported in school. All children should have access to accurate history, and books should not be banned. And I don't think any of those things are partisan issues. I would say that, you know, and if you're looking at candidates, then you're, you know, school boards, a lot of places are nonpartisan. You know, I know that's changing. You know, I think it's fair to say we're going to recommend candidates who share our values, and you know, that might skew to one side or not, but you know, I think that's what you tell people, because like I said, you saw the numbers, 87% of people like do not support, you know, book bans about race. And I think the numbers like in general, like 89%, like just book banning in general. So you know, that's why it's nonpartisan.
I would also just say that the League of Women Voters always says nonpartisan doesn't mean non-political.
Mhm.
Partisan is really about the parties, Democrat and Republican. And if you're not talking about one is good and one is bad or whatever, a political issue is nonpartisan. We don't endorse candidates, but we do drop leading information about where they stand on the issues that matter to us.
That's exactly what we did too with Red, Wine, and Blue. If some of our election cycles for some of our targeted races, we just put up a box that says, you know, these are the people who they're endorsed by these groups. They're endorsed by these groups. You can just see right on paper, you know, who's being endorsed by extremist organizations. And we, you know, or if they've made statements like banning, they want to ban books. Well, say here's a link to their statement that they want to ban books. You know, you're just giving information. All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much. Mary, thank you so much. We really appreciate your sharing your story and answering these questions. It was super helpful. And thank you to Julie. And everybody have a really good evening.
Night, everyone.
Y'all.